so we're going to link up. So we're going to go on a fast, me and you. And then you're going to be here next week. Both of us going to bring our best offering. And we're going to put it into the building fund. So the stuff that's been held up with the house, we fixing to work as a team because one can get 1,000, but two could put 10,000 to a flight. And so what God make happen for one, He'll also do for the other. So guess what? So when I help you unloose yours, it is going to help us unloose ours. See, because I know it can be frustrating sometimes when you got something planned and you keep waiting, but I'm just reminded of when the angel was coming down to talk to Daniel, and so he said, man, I heard you when you said it the first time, but I was kind of tied up, resting. And so a lot of times we don't understand, but things happen in the spirit to make sure that once we get it, we can keep it. Oh yeah. Let's go to Luke chapter 15. Because I got a long way to go and a short time to get there. But I did a lot of reflecting this week. And I mean, it was just so good for me. And so some of the things that I teach it may seem like it's a little bit different these next coming months, but I'm just believing God for a real transformation. And as I was preparing for the message today, I was doing some homework, and I came across something, a gentleman. In 1980, a 23-year-old preacher became the pastor of a storefront church in Smithers, West Virginia, with 10 members. It grew into 100 members. And then in 1990, he moved to South Charleston, West Virginia. And his congregation drew it in, and it grew to about 300. Then in 1993, he moved to Cross Lanes, West Virginia. It grew then to 1,100, where it's about 60% African American and 40% Caucasian. And in 1994, he started like a television ministry. And so that started growing. Then in 1996, his family and 50 staff members moved to Dallas. And in 2 years, it grew to 14,000. And now that church is over 30,000. And that pastor was T.D. Jakes.
Yes, sir.
The moral of that story was that he started with 10 folks in the storefront. And I would imagine that he had no idea that he was going to get to the magnitude of where he was. All he wanted to do was preach. But he was a living legend in that part until one day he preached a sermon that changed his life forever. And that was Get Ready. And so you said, well, Pastor, what does that have to do with the message today? It has to do everything with the message today, because we say faith generates action. And every time he heard God, he moved. And when he moved, there was increase. And so sometimes we don't move because we're just afraid of so many different things. And so my encouragement to you today is, when God tells you to move out on something, move out on something. Amen. We find our text over in Luke chapter 15, and for the sake of time, I won't go through and read line upon line. I'll just concentrate on the area that we've been dealing with. Oh, let me do this too. We want to say welcome to all of our friends by listening by podcast, and like we say every week, don't you touch that dial, amen. And we were talking about the Fantastic Four: finances, faith, forgiveness, and family. And we said we wanted them to be the 4 tenets that we would use to really hunker down as to how we were going to live this year and what we would focus on. And so last week we spent a lot of time on finances. And so this week we pick up with faith. But we know the area or the scene of this particular text where the young son decides that he wants his part of the living. And he asks his father to give it to him. He goes off to a far country. He spends it with riotous living. A famine happens. Then after the famine, he winds up coming back, or understanding that he needed to eat the husk of the swine. And one of the things that I realized as I was reading, that, you know, the Jewish, they hate pigs. And so when Jesus was giving this parable, he was trying to use the most disgusting thing he could to get them to understand how low he had become. And so sometimes in our lives, we'll get really, really low. I mean, a real bad place, a real dark place, a real, you know, just a place that we don't think we can return from, but God. And so here it is. He gets to a point where he thinks to himself, and that's what we pick up in 15. He thinks to himself, and he says, you know what, man, my daddy's servants are living better than what I'm living in. So surely I can do something for real. And so we see this in verse 15 and through 19, and this is where I'm just going to kind of concentrate on this time. But you see, it says that then he went and joined himself to the citizen of that country and sent him to the fields to feed the swine, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, here's the thing, when he came to himself, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? So he thought about it, and then he said something. He thought about it, and he said something. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And so verse 20, and he arose and came to his father, but when his father was still a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, ran, fell on his neck, and kissed him. And so then, you know, eventually he tells them, kill the fattest calf, give him a ring, a robe, put some shoes on his feet, let's throw a big party for him. But what wound up happening in verse 20 is where you see his faith, because his faith generated action. And so we have 4 tenets that we were working with and that we will be working with. The first one was finances can be a definer or a destroyer. We saw that it defined him when he first got to the country, because everybody thought he was the big shot. But then once he lost everything, then it basically destroyed him. So we have to be careful. Sometimes God just won't bless us because he wants to make sure that we can handle what it is that we need to handle. Number 2, faith generates action, and that's what we'll be dealing with today. That you know, when he saw in verse 20, he made up his mind, I'm going to do something, and so it generates action. Faith generates action. Then the third thing, forgiveness is a matter of the spirit and not of the flesh. If we can learn that, man, I can't wait to get to that. If we can learn forgiveness, really, to be honest, the reason why some of us ain't really moving in life is because we just won't forgive. I forgive him, but I ain't going to forget him. You cannot forgive and not forgive. And you can't forgive without forgetting. And then the fourth one is family provides covering, covenant, and conscience. And so we see here that once his daddy says, man, you come on back, and he's going to provide that same covering. So that's what the robe did. The ring was like a covenant. That's why when people get married, you know, they get a ring. Even in the Old Testament, back then, what they would do is sometimes the prophet would give somebody a ring so they could get a pass, so people would know that they were of the way. And then conscious. So he was able to really think about, because he remembered what he had when he was at home. And then when he thought about it, he said, oh no, I can live better than at home. And so today we want to just deal with faith. And so if you look at your message notes, Webster defines faith as a strong belief in God or in the doctrine of the word based on, watch this, spiritual apprehension rather than proof. See, we have become sold to the point we got to see everything. But I submit to you that you got to see it in the spirit before you see it in the natural. Everything manifests itself in the spirit first, and then in the natural. And so we have to get to a point that we walk and so that means that we have to really improve our vision, our spiritual vision, so that we can see it long before we see it. But now in the Greek, and you've heard me teach this before, but in the Greek, the word is called pistis. And it means belief or firm persuasion. Belief or firm persuasion. Have you ever had a friend or someone and you tried to tell them something and they wouldn't believe it? I don't care how much you tell them, you can tell them over and over and over again, but they just refuse to believe because in their mind was made up. They were firmly persuaded. See, somebody can't come to me and tell me that God don't exist. I'm going to say that again. Somebody can't, is an atheist or agnostic. Nobody can come to me and tell me God don't exist because I'm firmly persuaded. But watch this. In the Latin, it comes from the word fides, which means, like you've heard that word fidelity, where it means trust and loyalty. And so if we're going to be in faith, we got to trust God and we got to be loyal to God. I'm going to say that again. We got to trust God and be loyal to Him. See, some of us are trusting God, but a lot of us are not loyal to Him. So it's okay to trust, but what happens if I'm not loyal? And so we have to get to a point of understanding what faith really is. So when you put all these together, that means I got to believe, I got to be in firm persuasion, I got to trust God, but then I have to be loyal to Him. Wow. Now watch these basic competencies, and that's kind of where I'm gonna rock today. There's some basic faith competencies that I've come across. The first one is vision. You can't really be in faith if you don't have no vision. As a matter of fact, why be in faith if you ain't got no vision? So if you're not trying to go nowhere, you don't really need faith to go nowhere. If you're not trying to do something different than what you're already doing, then you don't need no faith. Other than to get up and breathe and live your life every day, that's just some basic faith. But if you're trying to really do something better than what you've already had, then it's going to require some vision. You're going to have to make sure that you have some vision. And I talked about this in another teaching about that even as personal folks, we have to make sure we have personal visions for our lives. We shouldn't just be wandering around aimlessly like I'm just here. You've heard me say it before. You ask some people, they can't tell you what they're going to do today. Next week, next month, next year. They can't even tell you what they're going to eat for lunch. They have no clue, no idea. They have no vision for their lives, and then they're not attached to anything with any vision. I submit to you that the reason why some people don't do well in church or they don't do well at the workplace is because they don't have a personal vision. So you can't follow or value a corporate vision if you don't have a personal vision. I'm going to say that again. You can't really value that's why I want you to check this out. Now check out your co-workers. You check out the ones who really don't buy into the vision of the organization, and I'll show you the ones who really don't have a personal vision for themselves. They always going through, they living from paycheck to paycheck, they moving from one place to the next place, they got the next boyfriend, the next girlfriend, the next wife, and they always, because they don't have a vision for themselves. And so if you're going to be a part of a corporate vision, you got to first have a personal vision, but that's just a basic faith competency. Now here's the second competency you got to have. You got to have some desire. If you're going to be in faith, you got to have some desire. I always use the example that when we were young and we were ready to get something for Christmas, and we was like, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get this. We kept saying it over and over and over again. But the reason why we were saying it over and over again, because we had a desire for it. Isn't it amazing that the things that we desire the most, we tend to speak the most? I'm going to say that again. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, the things that we desire the most, we tend to speak about it. The only time we don't speak about it is when we operate in fear and the devil paralyzes us not to say anything because we're afraid that we won't get it. I'm going to say that again. A lot of times, the only reason why we don't say what it is that we desire is simply because the devil has paralyzed us, and we don't want to say because of the fear that it may not come to pass. But you got to have a desire if you're going to do it. You see this in the text, because guess what? His situation really dictated his desire. I'm going to say that again. His situation really dictated his desire. So when he got to the point where he was having to try to eat the pods that the swine was eating, then all of a sudden his desire to be back home came about. But when he had the money and he left the crib, guess what? He didn't have no desire to be there. Because if he had a desire to be there, guess what? He would have stayed there. Now, I'm not knocking, because a lot of times people, theologians, beat up on him because he left. I can't fault him for wanting to do something on his own. Now, if he had left there, took the living that his dad gave him, flipped it, and then he became some big person in another country, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But he left, went somewhere, and it failed, and so it changed his desire. I guarantee you, even though the text never talks about it, sometimes we have to be dealing with what the text says and what it does not say. But I would imagine when he got back home, I bet you his desire to stay home was a whole lot different. Sometimes you have to go off and miss something and understand that, you know what, home is a whole lot better than somewhere else. Oh, I hope y'all hear me in the Holy Ghost. You know, so sometimes we go one place thinking, well, it's all good on this side, but then we realize that really it ain't as good as it looked. And so desire, that's a basic competency. But then the third thing is understanding. If you're going to be in faith, you got to have an understanding. You can't just get to the point where you got to be able to hear and recognize God. Wisdom is the principal thing. That's what the Bible says. But in all our getting, get an understanding. And so if we don't get an understanding, there is no way that we could truly be in faith. Now watch. Let me show you what I'm talking about. First thing I said is what you got to have vision, right? Let's go to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. Try to get there quick. Hebrews chapter 1, and I think, let me see what I want. No, I'm sorry, Hebrews 11. We're going to do Hebrews 11 at verse number 1. Hebrews 11 at verse number 1. You got it? Watch this. It says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. But watch this. It's the evidence of things not seen in the natural. The substance is the vision that you see in the spirit, and the evidence not seen is the stuff that you don't see in the natural. And so there has to be a transformation from the spirit to the natural. What do you mean, Pastor? So, like, say for instance, if you were building a house, then you in your mind, you know what you want it to look like. But you still, if you hadn't put it down on paper, only you know what it looks like. You can describe it for me, you can do everything else, but until you take an architect and you draw it and put it down, that's why they have what you call renderings, so that people can kind of see what it is that you're trying to do. I can remember when we would try to build schools, one of the things we would do is we would get a rendering of the school, so that when people would see it, they'd be like, oh, okay, I get it. But if you say you're going to spend $22 million on building a school or $50 million on building a school, folks will be like, what y'all spending all that money for? But then if they see the renderings, now they can see what you were trying to do. So you got to have vision to do it. And so here's the thing. It's a substance of things hoped for. So that means, Pastor, you telling me when I'm believing for something, it needs to be of substance? Yes, amen. It's no need of us believing for empty stuff. What you mean? It's no need of believing for stuff that you can do for yourself. You hear me say it all the time. God is not going to do anything for you that you can do for yourself. So that means you got to do some stuff yourself. Well, what you mean, Pastor? Well, here's the thing. If you say, I don't know why I'm over it, but I just keep rolling with it. If it says that you got to have $5,000 for a down payment, and you got extra income that you could be saving X amount of dollars every so often, then guess what? Don't expect God to give you $5,000 when you got extra income coming, but you just refuse to use it. He said, because see, God said, you praying, Lord, send me $5,000, send me $5,000. And the Lord said, I'm already giving you $5,000. I gave you more than $5,000, but you're not doing with what it is that I'm giving you. Folks be praying for a spouse. Lord, give me a spouse, give me a spouse. But the person they dating, they dogging them out. Amen. But you believe in God for a spouse. And so here's the thing. So there has to be substance of things hoped for and then the evidence of things not seen. So that's what your faith is the gap filler. Until you get it, your faith is the placeholder. So I already got it. I'm just in faith and waiting on it to come to pass. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's go to Romans chapter 10. Romans chapter 10. Got to get out of here in a timely manner. So I'm not going to fake and come in here and do what they do. So Romans, what I say, chapter 10 at verse 7. When you get there, say amen. Well, I'm going to do... Let me start at 6. But the righteousness of faith speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, you will ascend to heaven. That is to bring Christ down from above. Or who will descend into abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near thee, in thy mouth and in thy heart, the word of faith that we preach. Watch this. That if we confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, then you shall be saved. For the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. Watch this. Drop down to 17. 17 says, so faith comes by what? Hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So I went up to 7 and walked through to 9 because that's the basic principle of getting saved. People think that in order to be saved, then I got to do this, that, and the third. No, all you have to do is do Romans 10 and 9. But guess what? You can believe in your heart, but then confession is made unto salvation. And then we draw all the way down to 17 where it says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So if I want to get some faith, I got to do what? I got to hear the word. I got to hear the word. I got to hear some. In order for me to get some desire, the more I hear it, guess what? The more I'm going to desire it. Okay, Pastor, I need a practical example. Glad you asked. You know, sometimes you ain't even thinking about a Whopper until they kick that commercial on. You're not even thinking about a new car until they keep running that car that you really desire. But the more you see it, guess what? How many of you have ever saw a car that you wanted and you went and looked for it, and you've never really seen one on the road, but then all of a sudden when you start looking for it, you see it everywhere you go, and the thing that you say is, that's my... Why? Because of the desire. You desire it, and so now you start to speak it. And so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So my question to you is, what is you hearing? Not what are, what is? What is you hearing? Because here's the thing, you got to hear the right stuff to make sure that your faith operates. Faith operates on a certain kind of gas. If you put some junk in there, guess what? you ain't going to get no faith. That's why when I come here, I try to teach the word. Amen? Let's go a little bit deeper. Mark chapter 11. I'm almost done. Mark chapter 11. Because I'm trying to make a case here for you to understand why it is important for us to be in faith. Mark chapter 11 and verse 22. Y'all got it? All right, watch this. Well, yeah, I'll kind of set it up. They're on their way to the temple. And in the meanwhile, Jesus really was hungry. And so he saw this fig tree and it looked like it was getting ready to do something. Looked like it had some figs, but when he got there, it didn't have anything. And so he cursed it. And so when he came back, they saw it was all withered up. And they were like, Lord, you said it, and it came to pass. And so that's when Jesus gets to 22, and he says, and so Jesus answered and said unto them, have faith in God. For surely I say unto you, whoever says to this mountain, be thou removed and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believe that those things he says will be done, he will have whatsoever he says. Now, let me go back to 17. That's why it's so important to really hear the word, because faith comes by what? By hearing, and hearing by what? The word of God. So when I'm saying something, if I'm going to say unto this mountain, be thou removed and cast to the sea, and do not doubt in my heart, then whatever I believe, those things he says will be done. So that means that I got to be saying some stuff that we know will come to pass. And the only way I can do that is to say the word. Why do you think we pray all the time, and our corporate prayer is really based upon the word? Why? Because when we pray, we want to make sure that we pray in the word, because we know for a fact that the word is going to come to pass. And if we pray the word, if we speak the word, if we think on the word, then guess what? Then we have a better chance of bringing to pass what it is that we believe. Now watch this. Therefore I say unto you, whatsoever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. The reason why some of us don't have what we have, because we ain't been really believing what we praying. Some of us praying because we know we're supposed to pray about the situation, but we really don't believe. Some of us got more trust in ourselves than we do God. And I'm submitting to you that if you stop trying to do it yourself and let God do it, guess what? God will make it happen. Yeah. But until you decide to let God do it, you're going to have those problems. Now remember I said that there's some people that don't like to operate in faith because they're afraid. There's some vulnerability in being in faith. The first one is error. You know, we so self-righteous that we don't want to be wrong. So the last thing we want to do is be in faith and then we be off. What you mean? Well, I'm believing God for this job, or I'm believing God for my own business. You leave your job and go on the business, then it fails. And so a lot of times, folks, and if you've experienced anything like that, then the next thing that you do, because you failed the last time, you are vulnerable in terms of faith, because you say, you know what, the last time I stepped out like this is what happened, and so I don't want that error to happen again. There's a lot of folks who don't step out anymore because they was afraid to do it. Well, what you mean, Pastor? Let me make it even a little bit more plain. There's some folks that really refuse to get married again. Why? Because they... And so they said, no, I know what happened last time, so I don't want to do it again, so I'm afraid of the error. So let me go to number 3. Then the other one is failure. So a lot of times we're vulnerable because we don't want to be a failure. Really, I submit to you that it's really about pride. It's really about pride. And so we have to understand and know that it's bigger than us. And then the second one is disappointment. Some of us are not in faith because we don't want to be disappointed. You know, we get our hopes up and we like, yeah, okay, this is going to happen. And then what winds up happening? We get disappointed. And so we have to know and understand that, you know what? We just got to believe God, because if he said it, he's going to do it. So don't worry about being disappointed.